So let's get to this. So Krystal Ball went on Bill Maher, and and Bill Maher reminded me of why I would get so vitriolic about him when I would scream at the top of my lungs about his craziness, because he's just he's in a bubble. He's in a bubble, and it's a class bubble. He's in a millionaire bubble, right? So when he talks to a regular person, it's when they're waiting on him, or they're shining his shoes, or they're driving him somewhere. Do you see what I'm saying? And those are different conversations than you would have if you actually know those people. So here they are, and they're gonna say that the problem today is because the United States government spent too much money helping people during coronavirus, during the lockdowns, which, as you know, was the exact opposite happened. What they did was they passed a $5 trillion CARES Act, and almost none of that money went to help people. Almost all that money got grifted to the richest oligarchs in the country and the richest corporations, like airline companies, stuff like that. It didn't go to help people. You know who did that? Other countries made sure that if they locked down your business, other countries, meaning in the Western world, and if they locked down your business, you got a check. They would pay your salary. That didn't happen in the United States. Everybody got a one-time pay. What did you get? $1,400 and then $600? They got $2,000 for 2 years. Other people got their salaries paid in Western democracies that function, that aren't completely corporate captured like ours. So this guy and Bill Maher don't know what the hell they're talking about, and Krystal Ball does. And so this guy says that, oh, we spent too much money helping people, like the people who were unemployed because they closed their frickin' place of employment. And watch what Krystal Ball says.
The economy. There's way too much government spending, and that's why we have inflation. So that's a large part of that. It's just basic economics.
And that is not basic economics. We had this thing called a pandemic. We had a supply chain crisis, and by the way, there's a war in Ukraine.
It played a role. It's played a role.
So to act like the only reason we have problems now is because people got a little bit of money in their bank account is just not honest.
And a little bit of money, they got more than we spent in World War II. So don't act.
When he says a little money, when he says they, who do you mean they? Does he mean, so is he talking about the CARES Act? Because the CARES Act didn't go to they, the workers, they, the people. It went to they, the oligarchy. It was a fleecing of America, as Dylan Radigan and other people explained on this show. It was a fleecing. It wasn't, they didn't give money to people. They didn't help people barely at all. And that, as Dylan Radigan explained on this show and described it, the CARES Act was the equivalent of, if your economy was a car and your car was broken down on the freeway, you would send a tow truck to fix it or to tow it away and get it fixed. What the CARES Act was the government sending a bunch of criminals to pull the tires off, strip the engine, and take the stereo out and then take off. That's what the CARES Act was. And instead of taking that money and giving it to people, they took that money and they gave it to rich people already. And they threw it into the stock market and other places. And Bill Maher doesn't understand that, because Bill Maher only hangs out with other people who are millionaires. I'm jealous. I aspire to that. Okay, how about that? So here we go.
Like
hold on.
Whoa.
Hold on.
Don't act like, you said don't act. Don't act like we had to react to the pandemic exactly the way we did. We had to spend $6 trillion.
Okay, but how about the
forever flu.
trillions that the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street? For some reason, people don't get upset about that.
How much?
And that fueled the trillions of dollars the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street to backstop the stock market and the bond market. No one gets upset about that, even though that was a massive
I don't know what
factor in
you're talking
inflation.
about. What do you mean shot at Wall Street?
Well,
when are we talking about?
We're talking about buying assets, buying stocks, buying bonds, buying treasury bills so that they expand the balance sheet. This is during the crisis, the coronavirus crisis. When the stock market crashed, that is what the Fed did. They went into action. They shot
but the
trillions
stock
of dollars.
market didn't crash during COVID.
Now it's crashing.
So this is what happens when you get your news from MSNBC. Bill Maher is getting his news from his pal Rachel Maddow. Where do you think he's getting his news? And he's like, what? There wasn't a crash of the stock market at the beginning of COVID. Yes, there was. But guess what? They just threw money at it. It was a money cannon. That was a headline. That was one headline I remember covering. So he's completely doesn't know what he's talking about, and Krystal Ball does, and she goes on.
Crashing now.
It crashed, and the Fed came in and backstopped it. That's what happened.
What, it crashed, and we never heard about it?
No, it crashed. Go back and look at it.
I think
it fell off a cliff.
When?
The Treasury bond market stopped functioning, and the Fed took extraordinary action it's never taken in history.
I don't
Somehow
remember
no one
that.
gets upset.
I don't remember that.
Somehow nobody gets upset about the rich people who got tons of money and tons of support, way more than working class people did.
Sure
but
they
oh
do.
my God, people were able to feed their kids and they had a little bit of money in their bank accounts. It was the worst thing in the world.
No.
That is one small part of the inflation story, and is, by the way, not the only thing that we can deal with to get out of this.
Okay, so I think we solved the mystery of why no one gets mad at the trillion spent to bail out Wall Street during the pandemic, and it's because Bill Maher didn't know about it.
He's the barometer for what people know about. He really is.
He really is. Why didn't anyone know about it? Well, there were more important things to worry about. Masks, celebrity tweets about masks, and which superheroes were gay. So what was she talking about? She's talking about this. This is from PBS NewsHour. Federal Reserve to lend additional $1 trillion a day to large banks. The Fed is also buying Treasury bonds, just as she said. The Fed is also buying Treasury bonds at a furious pace and will soon run through $500 billion in purchases it announced on Sunday. It's also accelerating its purchase of mortgage-backed securities. Most analysts expect they will buy more. All the Fed's emergency steps are intended to pump cash. Now, remember what Bill Maher and that other guy was saying was that inflation is because we put too much the government spent too much cash helping people. They didn't spend almost no money helping people, fuckface. That was the problem with the CARES Act. It didn't help anybody. It just enriched the already rich. And which they don't know anything about the CARES Act. Bill Maher doesn't know anything about the CARES Act, and whoever that asswipe is sitting next to Krystal Ball also has no idea what's in the CARES Act or what it was. Like most Democrats and most fucking YouTubers don't know what the fucking CARES Act was. They reported it incorrectly.
Yeah, I only heard about it on here at the time.
That's right. The rest of them.
That's the only first time I heard of it.
Kyle Kalinske and all those fuckers. They're all saying, "Oh, but they had to pass this to get the unemployment through. They had to help. They had to do this. Bernie had to do this so he could get the unemployment." That's what Ro Khanna came on my show and said that. He said we had to pass the CARES Act because we had to get unemployment benefits to people. And I said, Ro, how happy are you that the only person who knows you're bullshitting is me, a fucking pothead comedian, and no one else is going to hold your feet to the fire? And he pretended like he didn't hear me say that because he couldn't. He couldn't admit he knows that. He had to admit that he had to pretend that didn't happen. And nobody who interviews fucking Ro Khanna is ever going to hold his feet to the fire for that bullshit vote on the CARES Act.
You know, a good rule of thumb is if they send a pittance to you, you can be sure they sent a fortune to somebody already rich just for you to get whatever little nonsense pittance that you got while you were locked down.
So they're given and they didn't run any of this by Bill Maher. So now Bill Maher looks like some old guy who doesn't know shit. He's like the male Joy Behar. Because nobody picked up a phone and told Bill Maher that we're going to be pumping cash into the financial system. So if you remember, this guy here watch what he says.
The economy. There's way too much government spending, and that's why we have inflation. It's a large.
But he's not upset about this government spending. And they're pretending like the CARES Act government spending went to help regular people. It was the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. I don't know if Krystal Ball said that. Maybe she doesn't know what's in the CARES Act, but maybe she did say that. I didn't see the whole segment, but I would have said that. I wouldn't have known the other stuff she said. That was good that she brought that shit up. I had to look it up, and she was right. So the CARES Act which she could have debunked it right then and there. No, that was the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. That was not social spending to help workers. Kind of a fucking chump do you think we are? Go ahead, Jackson.
Even it's just like all across the political spectrum, people understand this that are reasonable. I don't see how Bill Maher missed. Even Peter Schiff, he said while inflation was limited to the stock market, you had this pumping of cash into the top, corporations, and then they did stock buybacks. Like, I feel like this would have made Bill Maher's friends happy. He should have known about this.
Well, they all got rich off it. Go ahead.
I invested all my money into an NFT of a mortgage-backed security.
1.5 trillion. Wow. $1 trillion a day. You know how many 20-year dirty wars we could wage with that kind of money? Here it is, 1.5 trillion to prop up crashing markets. That's just a simple cash injection of 1.5 trillion, and then they get a lollipop, and everybody forgets the whole thing. Look at Bill Maher. The Fed said it will ramp up. This is from Forbes. The Fed said it will ramp up its overnight funding operations, buying repos or repurchase agreements by 1.5 trillion over the next 2 days. It's the third time in 4 days the New York Fed has announced that it will bulk up lending in the repo market. On Tuesday, it announced an injection of $50 billion, and it added another $25 billion on Wednesday. That's enough to cure homelessness, just so you know. And they did it with there was no town hall, no debate, no nothing. That guy just presses a button at the Fed, and that's what happens. That's it. That guy presses a button, and it's done. There's no democracy involved here.
They did have some meetings. Bilderberg meeting. It was a big one that they had.
Krystal Ball, hilariously showing Bill Maher he's in the right-wing bubble he used to mock conservatives for being in. He is not in a right-wing bubble. He is in a bubble. The bubble he's in is a class bubble. He's in a class. He's the same kind of guy who open-minded lefty who couldn't understand why Trump got elected in the first place. He thought it was all racism and sexism, which is what people in his class think. How do I know this? Because I'm in Hollywood, and I used to a lot more than now. I used to travel in those circles. I used to get invited to those parties. I don't anymore, after I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton. But I used to get invited to those parties until after Trump got elected, and I started telling people, no, it wasn't racism and sexism. We've always had that in this country. The Republican Party's been doing the Southern strategy since Nixon. This isn't new racism. This is the corporation trying to blame racism for people not willing to vote for the corporation anymore. That's what that was. People were hurting. People voted for Obama and their lives got worse. And that's what people like Bill Maher don't understand, because his life keeps getting better. Financially, I mean. So go ahead, Kurt.
Don't you like when they go, don't you know that Trump hates you? Like, well, maybe not, but they know you hate them. You make that clear.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what these people, that's what Bill Maher thinks. He's in that bubble. I'm not kidding. I went to a party one time with everybody from TV networks, right? All executive producers and all rich people. And it was crazy. They all said that. Oh, this is racism and sexism. It was right after Donald Trump got elected. And I was just sitting there like, wow, people really believe this shit. And it's a class bubble. And that's what I think. So here's another thing she says. She goes, the more unequal and brutal our society gets, the crazier people behave, and then elites swoop in to tell us our real problem is our fellow citizens, not ruling class theft, rigging, and failures. She sounds like Jimmy Dore. Holy shit. But if I say that, they'll tell me I'm a nihilist. Jackson, aren't you a nihilist if you say this exact thing? Isn't this what they're calling nihilism, Jackson?
And white supremacy. You can't forget about that.
That's right. That's also white supremacy. If you have this thought in your head and you talk about it, you're called a white supremacist and a nihilist. She'll do it herself. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So that's the problem with. So great job by Krystal Ball and Bill Maher. Bill Maher certainly gives it to you on a platter. Two fucking morons don't know shit what they're talking about, and then Krystal Ball gets to look like a genius. But she also speaks out of both sides of her mouth. And like, here's another one. Here's what she would call nihilism today.
Because whether they want to admit it or not, they do in fact need us in order to win. Now
she's talking about the Democratic Party needs people who consider themselves progressive. Now that term means nothing anymore because Hillary Clinton calls herself a progressive, but that's what she's saying. Actual progressives, they can't win without. She's talking about Bernie voters in the primary, stuff like that. They can't win without us. And so why not flex that muscle? This is what she used to say.
Certainly prefer not to have to give up anything of substance in order to get us on board. But in fact, their fixation on Trump and Trump alone does give us an advantage. The only question, and it's a big one, is if we're willing to use it. If we're actually willing, in a coordinated fashion, to make demands and be willing to withhold our votes. Individual voters here and there making their own unaffiliated decisions are, in fact, powerless. But as always, solidarity could be powerful. The only question, and again, it is an incredibly weighty one, is whether we're actually willing to grab that power and risk actually being the reason that Trump is reelected. Because while I think it's highly likely that because of their anti-Trump desperation, Democrats would cave to virtually any demands backed up by a truly credible threat, there's of course a chance that they don't. And there's of course a chance that such a coordinated anti-Biden opposition from the left would in fact result in a Trump reelection. And let's not sugarcoat what that means. It means being ready to carry the Trump admin's actions on your conscience, including the orphan babies at the border.
So does that mean when you voted for Biden, you're carrying all this shit on your conscience? Are you carrying that there's actually more kids in cages now? Is that on your conscience? And every bad thing you said Trump was doing, Biden's doing worse? Is that on your conscience? I don't think it is.
Footsie with white nationalists, the deadly level of sheer incompetence. It means being willing to be absolutely and thoroughly despised, seen as true villains, or perhaps an even greater magnitude than Trump.
Footsie with white nationalists, like $40 billion to them in other countries.
Yeah. So, yeah, you risk being called a white nationalist if you don't want to send money to white nationalists in Ukraine. And that's now called being nihilist, right? That's now called being a nihilist, right, Jackson? What she just said there? That to withhold your vote, don't participate, don't vote for them anymore. That's called, even under the threat of Trump, right? Now that's called nihilism.
Exactly.
Okay. So I just want to give everybody, even though she made some great points on Bill Maher, and I commend her for it, and I'm glad she was there to do it. There's a schizophrenia happening with people like that. And that's the nicest way I could put it. A lot of people, it seems disingenuous, but we'll see. Anyway, anything else you guys have what like to say about this segment? But the Bill Maher, anything about Bill Maher or the?
Oh, you want to hear funny? Kyle Dunnigan was in the store not that long ago, and this woman approaches him and she goes, "Hey, my friend's a stewardess on private jets." And Bill Maher, she was working while Bill Maher was on the jet, and she goes, "Hey, did you ever see this impression of you that Kyle Dunnigan does?" And then she was told not to approach Mr. Maher again. She had to sit in the back of the jet. He's big on taking a joke, not so much on a private jet, it turns out.
Wow.
He doesn't care for that impression.
That's funny. So Bill Maher is back to being the shit lib we always knew he was. And of course he doesn't know. And of course he doesn't know about this, not because he's a right winger, but because he's in a different class. Because he wasn't sitting home hoping the government was going to give him some unemployment, hoping that the government was going to give him enough money to buy medicine for his kid or buy medicine for himself or pay his rent or whatever. And he wasn't upset that this happened because it didn't affect him. He wasn't sitting at home broke, about to become homeless, and watching the government pledge $1 trillion a day to the banks.
You know, even more importantly, it means all of his writers didn't know about this.
That's right. hey, again, it is a class thing, and doesn't make you a bad person to be in a bubble, right? Because you don't know you're in a bubble, right? But it does make him unbelievably incurious, and it does show how it affects you. Barack Obama, Chris Hayes wrote a book about this, talked about just being close to these people affects you. Barack Obama said being in the room with all those moneyed people, it changes you. And so Bill Maher's entire life for the last 30 years, which his life I'm totally jealous of, has been traveling in those circles with those people. And so he doesn't understand that the government isn't spending money on workers. He doesn't get that. Hey, we're doing stand-up dates, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Chicago, Sacramento, and then San Diego, where I'm taping my new special. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all the tickets for all our live shows. We're coming to your town, maybe.